Welcome to the American Med Spa Association podcast, Medical Spa Insider. This week, AmSpa founder Alex Thiersch is speaking with Sam Pondrom from the law firm ByrdAdatto.
All right, that's the sound we like to hear. Recording in progress. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is Medical Spa Insider, the podcast of AmSpa. And today on the AmSpa hotline, the AmSpa video hotline of all things, we have Sam, the Professor Pondrom from the law firm of ByrdAdatto. He is a lawyer who has been with ByrdAdatto for a while. He is the reason I call him the professor, and I kind of made that up, but kind of not, Sam, because I've heard people call you that before because you seem to be like this, you seem to be the go-to lawyer when people have complicated questions that need answering. You're kind of the guy who holds office hours and is able to solve all these intricate issues. But I will say this, Sam, you've spoken at our boot camps. You've been a great addition to what AmSpa does into ByrdAdatto. And I was very surprised to learn this is the first time you've been on the podcast. So with that being said, welcome. How are things? Talk to me.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here. I must admit I was a little hurt. I hadn't been on one before. But no, I think it's, great that you guys do this, and it's a good way to get a lot of this information, especially these kind of spur of the moment things out there. But yeah, to your point, I'm now creeping up on a decade with ByrdAdatto. So
wow.
Yeah, it's been a while. I got to say, the professor is an unsanctioned nickname. I have not backed this, but
isn't that the kind of the point of nicknames, though? You don't really get to back it. I mean, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would not be nicknamed Big Pimpin'. But
the truth is there.
That's true. That's what happens. First of all, I was really honestly surprised. I thought you had for sure been on the podcast before, but that's all right. Here you are, and we'll make this, we can make this a regular recurring thing, if we give the fans what they want. So, but we're here today because there has been, we like to jump on when things in aesthetics, whether it's and there's been a lot of developments in aesthetics. We are going to talk today about something specific, which is the semaglutide and some of these the GLP-1 peptide shortages that have allowed folks to use these weight loss drugs to get them from compounding pharmacies. There's been a whole lot of movement back and forth as far as who can be offering these things, who should be offering these things. I will say it's been a great thing for the medical spa industry. A lot of folks have, by our study, it was up to almost half folks of med spas that were open that we surveyed were actually offering these types of treatments, these weight loss treatments. They've been a huge benefit for folks who need them, but they've also been, not without their controversy. And what happened here recently was we got some word that that it was going to be or was coming off the drug shortages list that the FDA, which governs medication and advertising of medication in the United States, was going to take it off the drug shortage list, or there was some scuttlebutt about that. Turns out that has not quite happened, but I think it raises a good question at a good time, so we can start thinking about what this means. So, taking a step back, Sam, first of all, what's the latest on this? Because we talked about this a little bit before we came on, but I had heard that it was going to be removed from the drug shortages list, and then I heard that it wasn't. Either way, what's the status currently? And then we can get into a little bit about what that means and what the impact of that is once we actually get into it.
Got it. Yeah, so there has been quite a bit of discussion about this, and I do think there is a fair bit of misunderstanding. The bottom line is it's still very, very much on the shortage list. And what happened is, there's this continuum of a shortage, and there's really two important things to understand when we're talking about these, is that shortages are determined by the FDA. And shortages are somewhat subjective. Like there's there's objective data that they look at, but there's some softer items to that where the FDA can say, hey, you know what, the demand on this is going to be massive, or the economic impact could be, something critical. And so there may be sort of some of these softer items to assess when we're talking about what's in shortage. But when something is in shortage, there's kind of subcategories, I would call them, of where something is at on that shortage continuum. And all that happened was one of those, it went from the kind of lowest end of the continuum, which is in shortage, nobody can really get it, manufacturers having trouble getting the components to produce it, to, available, which it just means that there is some brand name available from the manufacturer. And that's really the substance of the change. And I think probably clear up that terminology a bit, I think, if the FDA is listening. But yeah, it simply means that in broad strokes, there is some available. It by no means is an indication that there is sufficient level to address the shortage at hand.
Gotcha. So let's take a kind of a step back, though, even. And I think we may have addressed this on the podcast. It was a while ago if we did, though. When a drug goes on the shortages list with the FDA, so the FDA, for whatever these soft reasons are, for hard reasons, I think some of it is the manufacturer indicating to the FDA that it has sufficient qualities that are available, other things like that. But when it goes on the shortage list, as was the case with these drugs, and we're talking about you're talking about Ozempic and all these weight loss drugs that are widely used right now for a variety of reasons. When it goes on the drug shortage list, what does that mean? Like, what's the actual factual impact of that on the market and on med spas and on the public?
Yeah, so the impact of the drug shortage list, especially if we're looking at it now, creates one big exception. And what that is that these drugs that manufacturers have spent, tens, hundreds, millions of billions of dollars on getting approved by the FDA, that they otherwise would have complete domain over, and you can't copy the drug, you can't copy individual components of the drug. If the manufacturer cannot produce sufficient amounts, meaning it is in shortage, the FDA sort of says, okay, we're going to put that patent on hold, and regular compounding pharmacies, that they can get the components and basically make it in a generally safe manner, they can now either copy the drug or copy individual components of the drug, which in this case, are the key peptides, semaglutide and tirzepatide. And this makes a huge difference, because when only those manufacturers, in this case, Eli Lilly for Mounjaro and Zepbound, and Novo Nordisk for Ozempic, they've got a stranglehold on these things. And part of it is a reward for their time and efforts getting these things FDA approved. But it also gives them a monopoly of sorts for about 20 years, and especially in setting prices. And where the huge benefit has been here is now that compounding pharmacies can do it, there's price competition, and people have seen what this can be, manufactured for. And I think it's sort of trickling into, even as these things are generally heading towards out of shortage, it looks like it's going to impact the prices overall long term, which is, I think, super interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, and again, there are a lot of folks listening who aren't as well versed on FDA processes as you are. Because I was always under the impression, and a lot of folks have asked me, when a manufacturer makes a drug, there is a time period where they are in control of the drug. You're selling it as a brand name, whatever it might be, from Ozempic, Wegovy, to Cialis, right? Botox, whatever it might be. Those are under patent and can only be bought and distributed by the manufacturer who owns that patent, which is why right now, in our industry, we have issues with folks buying neurotoxins that are not brand name, right? They try to get them through some other way, and that's been a big issue. And there's actually been prosecutions and things like that from that. So this is a case where those brand names own the patents to these drugs. But is it that they just haven't been able to make enough of it? And if they haven't been able to make enough of it, the FDA steps in and says, okay, well, in this case, we're not going to really enforce that patent, or that patent is not enforceable, and other folks can get it from other sources. But they still can't use the brand name, right? That's part of that's part of the issue, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, being a lawyer, sometimes I have a tendency to sort of meander with my answers. But the short answer to your previous question is, if it's in shortage, it can be compounded regardless of patent. Like,
Gotcha.
if you had to succinctly state it, yeah, absolutely. That it can be compounded now, and that is why this is such a hot button issue right now. But yes, the other items to that, because, and again, a little bit of a primer here, when we're talking about intellectual property protection, patents are about things like designs and formulas and things like that. And so when we're talking about the patent, we're talking about what's making up the drugs themselves and the delivery systems. So something like the name, Ozempic, Wegovy, whatever, those are trademarked. It's a different type of intellectual property protection. And the impact of the shortage on the patent has absolutely nothing to do with those name brands. And so you need to be very careful as a provider or a pharmacy if you're going to say, hey, we're producing semaglutide, we're producing tirzepatide, not to involve the actual trademark names from Noble and Eli.
Gotcha. So, okay. So there's two separate things. There's the patent and the trademark, and the when the drug is not, if the drug is not in shortage, though, does that mean that folks will not be able to go to a compounding pharmacy and be able to say, hey, make me, semaglutide or tirzepatide? Is when that happens, if that were to happen, does that take it kind of off that market entirely?
Yes. The short answer, yes. The more complex answer to that is the FDA is very aware of the importance of this drug, the demand for the drug, and so I in just feedback from clients, potential clients, we've gotten this notion that one day the FDA is going to say, okay, it's not in shortage, which they will, but then it's like no more compounding. Right. The FDA in this case is quite reasonable about how this would work from a just normal standpoint, and so what they have indicated is that there will be some level of runoff. 60 days keeps getting bandied around, whereas they understand that compounding pharmacies are going to have the components of these drugs, and that if you simply just turn off their ability to compound, they're now eating a bunch of inventory. And you may also have patient abandonment issues where you have people who legitimately need these drugs for anti-diabetic use as well as weight loss use. And if the faucet proverbially turns off and there's no run out period, that can mean huge things for the health of those persons. So it looks like, yes, you're 100% correct that once the shortage is resolved, and that's what the FDA will call it. They'll say, hey, this is resolved. We're taking it off the shortage list. There will be a run out time where the compounders are still able to kind of burn through what stock they have. They'll still be able to be ordered at compounding prices. Meanwhile, the two major manufacturers are working hard to get their drugs into the market as well. And so there will be a bit of a handoff period.
Hey folks, it's Alex Thiersch. When it comes to injecting in the face, safety is more than skin deep. One wrong move could cause serious injury, hurt your reputation, and possibly endanger your business. That is why AmSpa partnered with the Academy for Injection Anatomy to create the AIA Advanced Cadaver Course, the most thorough and advanced facial anatomy course in the industry. Created and taught by renowned board-certified plastic surgeon Dr. Chris Surik, one of the foremost facial anatomists in the world, along with his hand-chosen faculty of the most experienced injectors in the industry. Students experience firsthand and close-up the anatomy of the face so that they can inject safely and confidently. Unlike other cadaver courses with large groups or limited access, the AIA Advanced Cadaver Course provides small group instruction with a high faculty-to-student ratio and a limit of 4 students per cadaver specimen. Everyone who attends gets a chance to inject real product and then dissect cross-sectionally to see how close they came to vessels and other important structures of the face. This hands-on cadaver lab follows a full day of instruction on facial anatomy from our world-renowned faculty, including discussions of complication management, rheology, and an introduction to the use of ultrasound in your practice by Dr. Steve Weiner, one of the pioneers of using ultrasound with facial injections. At this 2-day course, students learn how to avoid common danger zones, how dermal fillers behave, and the best places to place product for safe, outstanding results. More than 3,000 aesthetic injectors have improved the safety and efficacy of their injection techniques with the AIA Advanced Cadaver Course. Now it's your turn. Visit americanmedspa.org/AIA Advanced. Start your journey to safer injecting today. The AIA Cadaver Course will be in New York City on September 20th, Nashville on October 18th, and finally in Orlando on November 8th. See you there. Can't wait for that. That's gonna be a mess because I just feel like, well, maybe not a mess, but I feel like that's gonna generate all sorts of issues from the manufacturer side, the drug manufacturer side, and then I guess so. Assuming that it gets removed from the list, there is this handoff period that takes place due to market conditions, patient well-being, which I think are all valid reasons to have, you know, some up and down as far as the time period for when this gets removed. Once that handoff period is over, though, what does that mean for the market? And what, I guess the bigger question is, if you are a med spa out there or a compounding pharmacy and this guidance goes through and the drug is removed from the shortages list, time period starts to tick, what should you be prepared for when that time period ends? And what are the consequences? I mean, is this something where, like, are you just not going to be able to get the drug through a compounding pharmacy, or you can get it, but there's a risk because if you do it that way, you're going to be risking violating a patent and all sorts of other things and FDA regs?
I do think that ultimately you won't be able to get the drug from compounding pharmacies. Generally speaking, where there's a will, there's a way. And, so there may be people who will still risk production, but obviously, ethically, I can't be like, yeah, you'll probably be fine. Yes. So once that shortage is resolved and it's officially resolved, and, these two, the underlying peptides drop off the official FDA shortage list, and we have that run out period, that transition period, then absolutely you're going to have to be looking to the manufacturers themselves and having those conversations with your patient and saying, hey, look, over the next, I guess it's through that transition period, over the next 60, 90 days, whatever it is, we are going to have to transition where we're getting our drugs from. From a supply perspective, if this is done correctly, that should not be the issue. I think the biggest question right now is, from a cost perspective, how is this going to impact, the individual buyer here, the end patient user? And I know on the Eli Lilly side, they rolled out a couple of kind of direct consumer programs, assuming you have an actual prescription, but they are essentially subsidizing the cost of it right now. And I mean, I have to believe that will continue at least in the short run. Figure once the shortage stops and the transition period is done, 6, 9, 12 months, they may continue these things just to ensure that the patients that need these drugs or have become accustomed to utilizing these drugs are still able to source them, and continue treatment from their healthcare providers.
Mm-hmm. So what happens next? And I know there are things that clients of yours, as well as members of ours and listeners, need to keep in mind when it comes to advertising these drugs, when it comes to providing these drugs. What are some of the because this is interesting to me, because I feel like there's going to be some concern and some worry amongst med spa owners and providers about this, because they're going to think prices are going to go up. I'm not going to be able to sell it as much. A lot of folks have had a good run off of these drugs, which is not to say that profitability is the end all be all, but I know that it has had an impact on some of these folks. What types of questions are you getting from people about what comes next, and what are you advising them on what to be aware of in the next 6 months even?
Yeah, very valid questions. We do get a lot of this, and they come from a bunch of different angles, but ultimately they really boil down to kind of two things. And one, how do I continue to help my patients? Which it always makes me feel better when that's the first question, because it lets me know that the med spa, the clinic, whatever, has their mind in the right place. But ultimately, the revenue stream and the potential inability for patients to afford the drugs are very much secondary questions. And so I think the most important thing a med spa can do is communicate. And I say med spa, any provider of weight loss drugs, regardless of the type of your practice, is communicate and let people know. Because as we know, even with this, sort of incremental sub change to the, shortage status, there was a lot of miscommunication. And, some of it was unintentional, and some of it was, I hate to say it, very much intentional. But you're going to have people who are scared, right? Like, you're going to have patients who are coming to you as the provider and saying, what do I need to know? And I think that's where having some sort of resource for them, and whether it's even just a page on your website or some sort of social media blast or email blast or whatever, and ensuring that each step of the way, whether it's updates or whether when we're getting towards that resolution of the shortage or whatever it is, that you've already had conversations with patients, you prep them generally for what's coming, and then the conversations start getting more specific, right? So you're saying, okay, now we're entering the transition period. So you'll still get your drugs from me. They'll still come from compounding pharmacy X. They'll still be this amount, and this will hold steady for the next 2 months or whatever it is. And just talking them through those pieces from, a patient care standpoint.
Yeah, there's going to be some complexity with this too, because, oftentimes our industry, certainly FDA is not irrelevant there. When it comes to marketing, FDA approved drugs, the FDA has been involved, and we've had some commentary on off-label use and what you can do with FDA approval and what the FDA does in general. But typically, we don't get the FDA front and center when it relates to a one of these treatments that like we see this once every couple of years, whether it's it's body sculpting or what have you, that kind of comes on the scene and really causes a wave. We don't really see FDA compliance being a huge thing. It usually has to be with parts of other areas of compliance. And what I can some of the things I'm thinking of right now, and obviously as an attorney, not a physician, you can't comment on standard of care and things like that. But the brand name drugs, once they are the only ones that can be used, are not always identical to what you're getting at the compounding pharmacies. There's very, very slight, differences on a molecular level that can cause, I think, differences in the way that they impact people. So there's going to have to be some, I wouldn't say, I mean, there's going to have to be certainly some thought behind what consents you use, what you put into consents, like what different types of dosages that, are you going to have to come in and kind of do a whole new good faith exam again? I think there's going to be a lot of things we're going to have to start thinking about as we get closer to that. These are just coming off the top of my head. I mean, what are you thinking?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. And like you said, that first step is communication so that the patients know what's coming. But yeah, I absolutely think one, consents are a great point because early on in this, and I mean, I feel like we've been, on this for like 24 months now. Early on in this, one of our big things was, hey, your consents don't cover what you're doing, and not through any fault of your own. It's because we transitioned away from these, the brand name drugs, and we moved into compounded drugs, which raised other FDA issues, and some of it was for off-label use. And, there are these things that we have to talk to the patients about. And frankly, the nice part is this will simplify your consent a bit. It may make those conversations with patients easier. But I wholeheartely agree that one of the problems here is compounding doesn't happen on a standard formula. It's,
Right.
It's more within a tolerance rather than, a set formula. And so, yeah, there may be some variability there. And I think, again, having those conversations with patients, getting them into your informed consent and saying, you may experience different side effects. You may experience, different efficacy. Let's have these conversations. Don't assume it's normal. Let's talk. I think that's really important too. And that's the kind of additional piece to that is if you have patients who are looking at you and saying, I just can't afford this anymore. I think that's a really important conversation to have too, is looking at, okay, if not this, what else can we do? Or, if not exactly what we were doing, like you said, maybe a lower dosage, something like that, where you're still getting the drug and it's not just a drop off. But I think there is going to be a very strange marriage of patient care and making sure your patients are absolutely taken care of, and also balancing out the business aspect, not necessarily for the practice itself, but, practice and patient.
That's a really good point because, one of the things that is very attractive about our industry to providers who are coming into it is the fact that you can operate without having to deal with insurance. You don't have to go through insurance. You don't have to bill insurance. You don't have to get into all those federal payer laws and regulations that can be, even for a lawyer, can be overwhelming. When this process plays itself through, again, you mentioned this earlier, depending on what the manufacturers do, it could be, if not a significant price increase, at least a noticeable price increase. And for folks who are in here paying cash, they don't have the ability to put this on insurance because some of these aesthetics practices don't even accept insurance. That's going to take some getting used to as well. And I'm not saying that folks will all of a sudden switch over and start taking insurance, but if the price jumps appreciably, that's going to have an impact. And there's going to have to be some thought on, okay, well, do we do this on an insurance basis? Is that worth it given all the hoops you have to jump through? But it does make it more affordable for patients. I can see there being a lot of trickiness as this thing comes to pass for sure.
Yes. And I think, to your point, the question becomes, are insurance contracts worth it? Will it be covered? And I think that's
It'll
part
be
of it
covered.
is,
Yeah.
early on, we saw this all being covered for its anti-diabetic use. But for the weight loss side, especially if it's pure weight loss and there's
Right.
not, comorbidities or, just high-end obesity or anything like that, it really hasn't been covered. And so if there's a shift that direction, I have to wonder if some of this will be pulled out of, med spa and anti-aging clinics and shifted over to like PCPs who are just like, yeah,
Mhm.
you're over the BMI or whatever it is, the tolerance is. We already take insurance, so it becomes a natural service line extension for them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, this is why we do what we do, Sam, because we get to be in the middle of these incredibly exciting conversations about drug manufacturing and pricing, and whether to use insurance. This is what it's all about. So, this is going to be interesting to watch. I know you have, and ByrdAdatto puts out blogs and has their own podcast on this issue. We do as well. When folks ask you, where they get more information on this stuff, or how do they track it? I mean, is this just the kind of thing where you're paying attention to the FDA website? How do you keep track of this stuff? Because things are not going to change quickly, but there will be a time when they start to change, and when that happens, we're going to have people be informed. What's the best way to do that?
I would say keep in touch with us or AmSpa, but I'm a bit of a homer in that regard.
Well, it's the
Um,
best way. There's no question. It's
but
the best way.
I do think it's worth clarifying because sometimes we talk about this shortage list and people sort of, I don't know what they picture, but they don't think of it as an actual list. It's a legitimate list. Like you can go to the FDA's website and find the shortage list, and you just put in the first three letters of the drug, and boom, that'll tell you exactly what the status is if it's in shortage. So yeah, if it is something where you're interested in tracking this yourself, just Google FDA shortage list, and we're that's kind of how we keep up with this is just keep an eye on it. Obviously when Eli Lilly sent out those letters, the cease and desist letters, that I don't know if you'd even really call those cease and desist letters. Um, it obviously brought up a lot of attention to it very quickly, but it is something very much that as a provider, if you're like, oh, I can just, you know, check this every Monday or whatever it is, it's very doable. Obviously, we have a very close eye on it, and any further updates, we will send, like, kind of blast on and talk through what it means. Again, I
Yeah.
think the FDA really gets the importance and the impact of this, and so it seems like they are leaning towards communication over communication. So my sincere hope is that they, as we trend towards resolution, will be communicating that. And so even before we hit the transition window, it's, hey, we've been talking to the manufacturers. We're looking like resolution maybe in 90 days, 120 days, whatever it is, and then keeping that conversation going, just because I mean, frankly, the importance of this. This is one of those strange things where I honestly, like half the people I know are on the drug, some
I
version of the
know.
drug.
I know. It is. It is strange. Our food and beverage minimum at Medical Spa Show was much lower this year because of all of the GLP ones. Um, all right. I did actually reach out, believe it or not, to Eli Lilly and the other manufacturer whose name is escaping me. Or who's the second one?
Novo Nordisk.
No, right, that's right. And they did not return my call yet. So I'm still waiting because I want to get them on. I don't think that they will, but I would love to get them on and kind of pick their brain a little bit about this to see what they're thinking because, they've got they have some sort of a responsibility here, whether, and it's going to become interesting as we go because where does that responsibility lie? Particularly for folks who aren't in, don't have comorbidity, who don't have diabetes. Um, what is the response going to be to people who just want to lose weight because they want to look better, and who aren't really obese? You know, that becomes a whole nother question. And it's going to be interesting to see how they fall on that. Sam, I'll give you the last word. We've been at this for a bit. I think we've beat this horse to death, and I think there's a lot of good information. But what are you thinking as we go forward? And last words before we sign off.
Yeah, I think if I'm kind of bottom lining it, the really important takeaway, if you have nothing else from this, is that very much still in shortage. Don't worry about that piece. Continue working with, whatever pharmacy you've been working with. And the other piece of this is, while I don't think resolution is coming in the near future, as it comes, to your point, Alex, I mean, it's going to create a waterfall of issues. And the earlier as a practice or as a provider, you can start thinking about that and planning for it, even if there are some variables left, the better off you're going to be. So, whether it's internal or whether you're talking to AmSpa or whether you're talking to us or whoever, your counsel is, and it's not something you can bury your head in the sand and say, oh, that's a future me problem. It's definitely something you want to meet head on.
I agree. Well said. Sam Pondrom, ByrdAdatto, what's the best way to get a hold of you if someone has a question? They want to pick your brain a little bit. Is it email? Feel free to give your cell phone out and just have everyone text you.
Well, I'll have to get a burner first, but yeah, just info@ByrdAdatto.com. You can also submit requests through our website and just say, hey, I'm looking to talk to somebody about whether it's this or any other sort of, corporate law or healthcare law issue. And then, you can, all of us are on the website if you want to email people individually. But yeah, cold front desk, shoot an email to info, whatever works best for you.
Just ask for the professor and you'll be connected immediately. Everyone knows who that is.
See, I don't like the professor because it ages me.
Yeah, you know what? But honestly, Sam, the fact that you don't like it means that it's probably going to stick.
Yeah.
Isn't that how it always goes?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, so we can do like adjunct professor. What would make you feel better?
I don't know. Now you're putting me on the spot. The legal stuff I can do. The nickname it's in my head.
Adjunct. I like that. We'll just call you adjunct. All right. That sounds better. All right, Sam, I appreciate your time. This is an important issue. We will definitely be following up and tracking it. And I've got a bunch of things kind of running through my head that I think, that folks are going to have questions on. How do they, for instance, how do they communicate with their patients? What are some of the things they should be saying? That's some guidance we can probably provide folks. This is really interesting, though. Thank you again for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching the Medical Spa Insider podcast. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel for future videos and podcasts. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, please check our description below.